Are these meant to be genuine? The question, filled with the easy disrespect of a man who had never faced real struggle, rang out in the huge quiet of the courtroom. Judge Morrison, a man whose expensive suit cost more than the truck Robert Carter had driven here, leaned forward over his shiny desk, a mean smile on his face. He looked down at the elderly man standing before him for a basic traffic ticket. Robert Carter, 82 years old, stood completely still. His back was straight, showing a strength built in a time and place this judge could never understand. He wore a plain, worn denim jacket, the type that had seen many years of sun and rain. Attached to the left side, just over his heart, were 3 rows of ribbons and a single star-shaped medal hanging from a light blue ribbon. They were what the judge found funny. Your Honor, to Robert's court-appointed lawyer, a young woman named Lisa Martinez, started, "My client's military record has nothing to do with this case." Judge Morrison waved his hand in dismissal, not even looking at her. His eyes stayed locked on Robert. "I'm certain it doesn't. I'm just interested. It's quite a display for a man who can't seem to recall the speed limit on a country road. Let me take a guess. You purchased them at a second-hand store. A little fake jewelry to wow the people at the Veterans Hall." The small crowd, mostly filled with people waiting for their own small violations to be called, moved uncomfortably. A few laughs could be heard from the back, but most just watched, a mix of sadness and embarrassment on their faces. Robert Carter said nothing. His eyes, clear and gray as a winter morning, were focused on the state flag hanging behind the judge. He wasn't mad. He wasn't offended. He seemed to be somewhere else completely, a place of deep and steady peace. "I asked you something, sir," the judge pushed, his voice getting louder. He liked this, the small-town authority of his role, the power to break a person down bit by bit under the cover of court power. "Are you going to respond to me, or are you as hard of hearing as you are decorated?" Lisa Martinez stood up taller, her face red with anger. "Your Honor, this is wrong. Mr. Carter is a veteran and deserves our respect." "Respect is something you earn, counselor." Morrison shot back, his voice like a sharp crack. "And walking around with a chest full of cheap metal doesn't automatically earn it in my courtroom. Now, Mr. Carter, for the final time. Where did you buy the medals?" Robert's look slowly dropped from the flag and met the judge's. His voice, when it came, was soft, but carried real weight, like smooth river stones. "They were given to me." The basic answer seemed to make the judge more angry. It gave him nothing to mock. "Given to you by who?" "The costume store owner." He leaned back in his big leather chair, a picture of smug power. "Let's be honest. I am sick of men of a certain age thinking a uniform they wore 50 years ago gives them special treatment. You ran through a stop sign. You were going 20 miles over the speed limit, and you stand here in this silly jacket as if it's some kind of protection? I find it disrespectful to the actual heroes who served." Each word was a planned hit meant to embarrass. Lisa could feel the anger in her own body, a tight spring of rage. She looked at her client. Robert's hands, rough with age and marked with spots, rested quietly on the defense table. He didn't move. He didn't react. He just stood there taking the judge's poison without any sign of emotion. "Remove the jacket," the judge ordered. A shared gasp went through the courtroom. This was no longer about a traffic ticket. This was a public removal of dignity. "Your Honor, you can't be serious," Lisa begged, her voice shaking a little. "I am completely serious, counselor. This is my courtroom. The defendant will show it the right respect. That display is a distraction. Remove it, Mr. Carter, or I will find you in contempt." The bailiff, a heavy man who had seen his share of courtroom trouble, took a careful step forward. His eyes met Robert's, and for a moment he looked unsure, even sorry. Robert did not move. He did not look at the bailiff or the judge. He looked at the medals on his own chest, his eyes staying for a tiny second on the one hanging from the blue ribbon. He seemed to be hearing a faraway sound, a noise no one else in the room could hear. His silence was his response. It was a deep and firm no. "Fine," the judge spit out, his face turning a blotchy red. "Bailiff, add a charge of contempt of court and a $500 penalty. Maybe that will grab his attention." The judge's eyes focused on the most important medal, the one that hung a bit separate from the others. He pointed a thick finger at it, especially that one, the nerve to wear a fake of the Medal of Honor. "Do you have any clue what that represents, old man?" The blood and pain it stands for. You wearing that is an insult to every person who ever served with honor. As Judge Morrison spoke, the clean wood-paneled courtroom seemed to fade around Robert Carter. The judge's mocking words disappeared into a roar, not of an angry crowd, but of helicopter blades and screaming men. The air, heavy with the smell of floor wax and old coffee, was suddenly filled with the metal smell of blood and the bitter smoke of gunpowder. For a quick second, he wasn't standing on worn floor tile, but was back in the thick mud of a rice field outside Hughes City. He wasn't looking at a judge's mean face, but at the scared wide eyes of a young soldier, a kid from Ohio named Miller, whose leg had been torn apart by machine gun fire. The blue of the medal's ribbon was the impossible bright blue of the sky he saw through the jungle trees, just before he climbed from the safer spot of a bomb hole. He could feel the weight of Miller on his back, the hot, wet feel of blood through his uniform, the loud sound of the enemy guns making a line in the mud just inches from his head. He remembered the burning in his chest, the single desperate thought not of living or dying, but of getting that boy to the rescue helicopter. The medal wasn't a piece of cheap metal. It was the weight of another man's life. The memory went away as fast as it came, leaving Robert back in the quiet, tense courtroom. He blinked slowly, his calm unbroken. Only his breathing had changed, becoming just a bit deeper, a little more controlled. Lisa Martinez watched the whole thing, her heart beating with a helpless anger. She saw the judge's cruelty, the crowd's scared silence, and Robert's amazing, almost strange calmness. She knew with a feeling that froze her that this was a terrible wrong. The judge wasn't just mistaken. He was destroying something sacred. She looked down at the case file. Robert Carter, a few old speeding tickets over the last 20 years. Nothing else. Address, social security number, date of birth, on the intake form, in the box marked military service. Robert had simply written yes. He hadn't listed a branch, a rank, or a single award. The modesty of it in the face of this public beating was stunning. An idea sparked in her mind, a desperate long shot. While the judge was busy talking to the court recorder, adding his self-righteous reasons to the official record, Lisa leaned over to Robert. "Mr. Carter," she whispered, her voice urgent, "is there anyone I can call from your old unit?" Robert turned his head slightly, his look meeting hers for the first time. There was no fear in his eyes, only a deep, real tiredness. He gave a barely visible shake of his head. "It was a long time ago, miss. Most of them are gone now." "There has to be someone," she said firmly, refusing to give up. She saw a small, almost hidden pin on his jacket collar, a simple badge she didn't know. "Let me just step out for a moment. I need to grab a file from my office." The judge waved her away without looking. "Do what you want, counselor. Your client isn't going anywhere." Lisa almost ran from the courtroom, her heels clicking fast on the polished floor. She ducked into an empty corner in the hallway, her hands shaking as she pulled out her phone. She didn't have a file to get. She had the pin. She quickly typed a description of it into the search box. U.S. Army badge stored behind a castle tower. The results came flooding in. 1st Special Forces Group, the Green Berets. Her breath caught. This was something else completely. She scrolled through the search results, looking for a contact, a public relations office, a veterans helper, anything. She found a general number for Fort Lewis, the group's main office. It was a wild chance, a shot in the dark. A bored-sounding specialist answered the phone. "Fort Public Affairs. My name is Lisa Martinez," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm a public defender in Northwood County. I have a client here, a veteran. He's in trouble. Ma'am, we can't get involved in civilian legal matters," the specialist said, his voice flat with practiced lack of interest. "I know, I understand, but his name is Robert Carter. He's being held in contempt of court because the judge doesn't believe his medals are real. Ma'am, I can't. He's wearing a first group pin." She shouted her last desperate card. "Please, his name is Robert Carter." There was a pause on the other end of the line. The bored tone was gone, replaced by a sharp, focused quiet. "Spell the last name for me." "Carter," she said quickly. "First name Robert." She heard the sound of fast typing, then a sharp breath in. The voice that came back was totally different. It was crisp, urgent, and filled with an energy that made the hair on her arms stand up. "Ma'am, what courtroom are you in?" "Courtroom C, Northwood County Courthouse. Do not let your client leave. Do not let them take him anywhere. We are on our way." The line went dead. Lisa stood frozen in the corner, her phone still pressed to her ear, the specialist's final words echoing in the sudden silence. "We are on our way." Hope, strong and bright, rushed through her. Help was coming. The phone call ended in Washington State, but the shock wave it created moved at lightning speed. The specialist who took Lisa's call didn't wait. He skipped 3 levels of his own command, sending the call directly to the office of the base's commanding officer, a battle-hardened colonel. The colonel listened, his knuckles turning white as he gripped his desk. The moment he heard the name Robert Carter, he stood. "Hold the line," he ordered, and without another word, he walked out of his office and down the hall to a larger, more fancy suite of rooms, not even bothering to knock. Inside, General David Stone was reviewing supply reports. He was a man made from rock and the steel with 3 stars on his shoulders and a look that could melt paint. He looked up annoyed at the interruption. "Sir," the colonel said out of breath, "we have a Code Nightingale." The general's eyes became sharp. Code Nightingale was an unofficial, unwritten rule. It was saved for a handful of living legends, men whose service was so special that the military itself was honor-bound to protect them no matter what. It had not been used in over 10 years. "Who?" the general asked, his voice a low rumble. "Sergeant Major Robert Carter, sir." General Stone was out of his chair before the colonel finished the sentence. The supply report scattered across his desk, forgotten. A look of shock followed by a powerful anger passed over his face. "Where is he?" "Northwood County Courthouse, sir. A local judge is holding him in contempt, saying he's faking his medals." "Specifically," the colonel added, his voice filled with disgust, "the Medal of Honor." The general's jaw tightened until a muscle bunched in his cheek. He moved with a speed and purpose that went beyond his age. He pointed a finger at the colonel. "Get me a helicopter to the nearest airfield and a car waiting. Full honor guard escort dress uniforms. I want to be there in under an hour." He turned to his assistant, who was already jumping to his feet. "Get me everything on Judge Morrison of Northwood County. I want to know where he went to school, who he owes favors to, and what he had for breakfast. Burn the phone lines. I want this handled to the colonel." He gave one final cold order, "and get the Secretary of the Army on the line. Tell him a national treasure is being publicly embarrassed by a man who doesn't deserve to clean his boots." Back in courtroom C, the air had grown thick and stale with Judge Morrison's self-satisfaction. He had made his point. He had scared the young public defender and was now preparing to deliver his final crushing blow to the silent old man before him. Lisa had returned to the defense table, her face pale, but her eyes holding a new defiant spark that the judge chose to ignore. "Given your refusal to follow a direct order from this court," Morrison began, enjoying each word, "and your clear state of confusion regarding your past actions, I am not only holding you in contempt, but I am also worried for your mental health." He let that hang in the air, a poisonous cloud. "Therefore, I am ordering a required 72-hour mental evaluation. The bailiff will hand you into the custody of the county sheriff's department, who will transport you to the state hospital for testing." This was the ultimate shame. Not just a fine, not just jail time, but a statement that Robert Carter was crazy, that his life, his service, his honor were the lies of a broken mind. The gavel was in his hand. He raised it high, the final end mark on his small tyranny. He never got to bring it down. A muffled noise from the hallway outside stopped him. The heavy oak doors to the courtroom burst open, swinging inward with such force that they banged against the walls. 2 soldiers standing straight in perfect army dress, blues, entered the room. They moved with a synchronized, powerful grace, one taking up a position on the left of the entrance, the other on the right. They stood at perfect parade rest, their faces blank, their eyes fixed straight ahead. The courtroom fell into a stunned, complete silence. Judge Morrison froze, his gavel still held up, his mouth slightly open. Then a third man entered. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his dark green uniform perfectly pressed, the jacket shining with its own impressive display of medals. 3 silver stars gleamed on each of his shoulders. It was General David Stone. He didn't look at the judge. He didn't look at the crowd. His eyes, sharp and intense, scanned the room until they found their target. He began to walk down the central aisle, his polished boots making a sound like measured, deliberate heartbeats on the tiled floor. Click, click, each step was a judgment. Each step changed the balance of power in the room. The air crackled with an authority that made the judges seem like a child's fit. General Stone stopped directly in front of the defense table, less than 2 feet from Robert Carter. For a moment, the two men just looked at each other. A universe of shared understanding passed between them in that silent look. The general's hard face softened with a look of deep respect and something like worship. Then, in a move that sent a shockwave through the entire courtroom, General David Stone snapped to the sharpest, most perfect position of attention of his life. His right hand came up in a salute so crisp, so perfect it seemed to cut the air. His gloved fingers touched the edge of his hat, his arm a solid line of respect. Sergeant Major Carter. The general's voice boomed clear and strong, filling every corner of the silent room. It is an honor to be in your presence, sir. He held the salute, his eyes locked on Robert's slowly, as if waking from a long dream. Robert Carter straightened his shoulders. The tiredness seemed to fall away from him, replaced by an echo of the soldier he had once been. He brought his own hand up, his movements stiff with age, but no less exact, and returned the salute. Judge Morrison finally found his voice sputtering with confusion and rage. What is the meaning of this? Who are you? I am in the middle of a court proceeding. General Stone slowly lowered his hand, but his eyes never left Robert. Only after Robert had lowered his own hand did the general turn his head. He pinned Judge Morrison with a look so cold and angry it seemed to drop the temperature in the room by 20 degrees. The meaning, Your Honor, the general said, his voice dangerously quiet, is that you are in the presence of a hero of the Republic, and you are about to learn a lesson in respect. He took a step toward the platform, pulling a folded piece of paper from his inner pocket. You question this man's medals. Let me educate you. He began to read, his voice ringing with pride and anger. Sergeant Major Robert Carter, enlisted United States Army, 1958. Served with honor for 30 years, 3 tours in Vietnam. Member of the 5th Special Forces Group in the Military Assistance Command, Vietnam Studies and Observations Group. He paused, letting the weight of the legendary unit's name settle in the room. Awards and decorations include the Bronze Star with V for Valor, 3 awards, the Silver Star, 2 awards, the Distinguished Service Cross, the Purple Heart, 4 awards. With each medal named, a new wave of shock rolled through the crowd. People were sitting up straighter, their faces a mix of amazement and shame. A local reporter in the back was writing frantically in his notepad. And this one, the general said, his voice dropping as he looked at the medal on the blue ribbon. This flashy piece of tin you so easily dismissed. This is the Medal of Honor awarded to then Staff Sergeant Carter for obvious bravery and courage at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. On February 4, 1968, near the city of Hue, Sergeant Carter, with complete disregard for his own safety, single-handedly attacked 2 enemy machine gun positions, destroying them both, and proceeded to carry 3 wounded friends across 200 meters of open fire, swept ground to a medical evacuation point. He then returned to the fight. The general folded the paper, his movements sharp and deliberate. He stared at the judge. This man's jacket holds more honor than this entire courthouse, yourself included. He is not a defendant. He is a national treasure, and you and your pride saw fit to embarrass him. Judge Morrison's face had gone from red to a pale, sickly white. He looked small and powerless behind his large, imposing bench. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He was, for the first time in his professional life, completely and totally silenced. The gavel lay forgotten on his desk. The general turned back to Robert. Sergeant Major, on behalf of the United States Army and a grateful nation, I apologize for the shame you have been put through today. He then turned his icy look back to the judge, his voice dropping to a low, threatening tone. As for you, Your Honor, you seem to have a problem with veterans. I would suggest you fix that. I have already been on the phone with the office of your state's governor, as well as the head of the Judicial Conduct Commission. They are very, very interested in today's transcript. I imagine your career of public service is about to come to a rather quick end. The finality in his voice was complete. He had not just won the argument. He had torn down the judge's entire world in less than 5 minutes. It was Robert who broke the following silence. He placed a gentle hand on the general's arm. "David," he said, his voice soft but clear, "he's a man who made a mistake, a bad one, but he just didn't know." He looked up at the judge, not with anger or victory, but with a surprising gentleness. "The medals aren't the point, son," he said, his voice carrying the quiet wisdom of a man who had seen the best and worst of people. "They're just reminders. Respect isn't something you demand with a gavel. It's something you give freely to the person standing in front of you, whether they're a general or a janitor. That's all the lesson there is." As Robert spoke of giving respect freely, the image of the courtroom faded for one last quick moment. He was no longer an old man in a courthouse, but a young man in a hot jungle, his uniform torn and stained with sweat and blood. He was kneeling beside a captured enemy soldier, no older than a boy, whose eyes were wide with fear. Robert's own water bottle was low, but he unscrewed the cap without hesitation and held it to the boy's lips, giving him a drink. It was a small act of grace in a world of horror, a quiet recognition of a shared humanity that went beyond uniforms and battle lines. The honor wasn't in the fighting. It was in remembering you were a man. The fallout from that day in Courtroom C was fast and final. The story, broken by the local reporter and quickly picked up by national news outlets, went viral. The image of General Stone saluting the humble old veteran became a symbol of honor and responsibility. Judge Morrison was suspended, and after a formal investigation by the State Judicial Commission, he was forced into an early disgraced retirement. In response to the public outcry, the state legislature passed a new bill unofficially called Carter's Law, requiring cultural understanding and respect training regarding military veterans for all public officials. General Stone made sure that Robert's traffic ticket was not just dismissed, but formally removed with a written apology from the state. Robert wanted none of it. He went back to his quiet life, fixing his truck in his garage and meeting his friends for coffee on Tuesday mornings. About a month later, Robert was sitting in his usual booth at a small local diner. The bell over the door rang, and a man walked in, looking uncertain and out of place in a simple polo shirt and slacks. It was Morrison. He looked older, smaller, stripped of his court robes and pride. He saw Robert and walked slowly over to the table. "Mr. Carter," he said, his voice quiet. Can I sit down?" Robert simply gestured to the seat across from him. Morrison sat, his hands fidgeting on the table. "I wanted to apologize," he said, not looking Robert in the eye. "What I did, what I said, there's no excuse for it. I was arrogant. I was cruel and I was wrong. I'm sorry." Robert took a slow sip of his coffee. He looked at the man across from him, a man broken by his own pride. He saw no reason for any more punishment. "I hear you're not on the bench anymore," Robert said, his tone neutral. "No," Morrison admitted. "I'm not." "Good," Robert said, and for a second Morrison flinched. A man shouldn't have a job he doesn't have the heart for. He pushed a menu across the table. "The coffee is good here." It was an offer of peace, a simple, graceful act of forgiveness. Morrison looked up, finally meeting Robert's gaze, and for the first time he saw not a defendant or an old man, but simply a person worthy of respect. He nodded, a weight lifting from his shoulders. Stories like Robert Carter's remind us that heroes walk among us every day, often unseen. If you believe in honoring their quiet valor, please like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that deserve to be